which says, what would you say to people who use a naturalism of the gaps? We don't have a naturalistic explanation nowadays, but we'll get one in the future. So how would you respond to this kind of objection to like miracles or NDEs, or where you want to take this?
Well, any kind of gap explanation is problematic from the get-go. Because if really the only reason that you are explaining something is to save your theory from falsification, and you don't have any other positive reasons for explaining it in light of your worldview or theory, then that is the classic definition of an ad hoc question begging argument. Christians do not use a God of the gaps explanation. We only will appeal to God if there are positive reasons to think that God is responsible. And that's why the intelligent design movement, for example, doesn't just appeal to God to cover our ignorance. No, it has to satisfy the intelligent agent principle. And there have to be positive reasons for thinking this was done by a person. So now, if a naturalist practices this and they have no additional reasons, then I would charge them with a inappropriate ad hoc question begging explanation. The other thing I would say would be that there are sometimes in principle difficulties for naturalism versus the current state of our knowledge problems with naturalism. Now, let me illustrate this. There's sometimes a person may inappropriately appeal to God doing something because, given the current state of what we know about this subject matter, the theist is just appealing to ignorance, because in principle that naturalism can explain that if we try harder and get more information. At least it can do so in principle. All right, I think those are bad examples of appealing to God. However, there are cases where there is a limit to scientific explanation, so that science in principle cannot explain this phenomenon, but a theistic explanation can. I'll illustrate this. Years ago, Richard Dawkins was on the Bill O'Reilly show on Fox News. And O'Reilly asked him, he said, well, what do you do at the beginning of the universe? What caused the universe to begin to exist? And Dawkins said, we're working on it. Now, what he meant was that this is a question that if you'll give us a little more time, we'll come up with a naturalistic explanation. So it was a promissory note. What Dawkins failed to realize is that scientific explanations can only work if you already have a universe. Because scientific explanations explain transitions from one entity to another entity according to a law, statistical or deterministic, and an underlying model. So you have to have a gas that's got a certain pressure and temperature, let's say at a constant volume. If you're going to explain why heating it causes the pressure to rise, because that explanation will appeal to the ideal gas law and the model of the atomic theory of gases. But what science can't do is explain the coming into being from nothing, because that is not a transition. It's a point action. It just occurs, and there's nothing there to apply a law to. So the question of what science can do is infer from phenomena that the universe began to exist. They can do that, but they are incapable of giving an explanation for what caused it, because that explanation is not subsumable under scientific laws or models. You have to have an entity before you can even build a model or a law to explain its transition to another entity. Now, this is a case where Dawkins failed to realize that this is an in-principle problem with a naturalistic scientific explanation, not, well, we're still working on it. Same thing's true with the origin of consciousness. This is not a matter of working harder. This is an in principle problem, because you can't get mind from matter by just rearranging matter. That's getting something out of nothing. And it is in principle not possible. So that's what I would say to the naturalist. I would try to take a look at what the issue was and realize that there are in principle limits to science, and this question falls outside their limits, or maybe it doesn't. I would want to make that on a case by case basis.